Jerusalem is one city, but it holds three dreams. For Jews, it's the site of the ancient temples. For Christians, the land where Christ died and rose. For Muslims, the place where Muhammad rose to heaven. But shared holiness has not brought peace. It has brought centuries of conflict, conquest, and bloodshed. So how did one city become the battleground of empires and eternity? Muslim conquest, 638. In the early 7th century, the Byzantine Empire controlled Jerusalem, but it was weakened both politically and spiritually. Religious divisions, heavy taxes, and decades of war with Persia had left the region vulnerable. When the Muslim armies arrived under the banner of the new Islamic caliphate, they found a city tired of imperial rule and open to negotiation. In 638 CE, Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second leader after Prophet Muhammad, approached Jerusalem after Muslim forces had secured much of the Levant. Rather than storm the city, Umar accepted its peaceful surrender from the Byzantine governor Sophronius. This moment marked a dramatic shift. Jerusalem had changed hands without destruction. Umar's entry into the city was humble. He refused to pray inside the church of the Holy Sepulchre out of respect for Christians, so that future Muslims wouldn't claim it as a mosque. Instead, he prayed on nearby ground, where later the Al-Aqsa Mosque would be built. This gesture established a tradition of religious tolerance that for a time defined Muslim rule in Jerusalem. Not long after, the Dome of the Rock was constructed on the Temple Mount, known in Islam as Haram al-Sharif. Built by Caliph Abd al-Malik in 691 CE, the Golden Shrine marked the spot where Muslims believed the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven during the night journey. Jerusalem now held a new layer of sacred meaning, becoming Islam's third holiest city. Under early Muslim rule, Jews were allowed to return to Jerusalem for the first time since Roman bans centuries earlier. For a brief moment in its long, conflicted history, Jerusalem became a city where Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived side by side, under a single faith's political authority, but not a single claim to truth. The Crusades and Saladin. By the end of the 11th century, the balance of power in Jerusalem shifted again. Muslim rule had fractured, and the city was vulnerable. In 1195, Pope Urban II called for a holy war to reclaim Jerusalem for Christianity. His words echoed across Europe, drawing kings, knights, and commoners into what became known as the First Crusade. In 1199, after a long and brutal march, Crusader forces reached Jerusalem. Their siege lasted weeks. When the city fell, it was met not with mercy, but with massacre. Tens of thousands were slaughtered. Muslims, Jews, and even Eastern Christians. Blood ran through the streets. Holy places became battlegrounds. The Crusaders established a Latin kingdom of Jerusalem and ruled the city as a Christian stronghold. But the Crusader kingdom was surrounded by hostile lands, and it would not last. In 1187, a new leader rose in the Muslim world, Salah ad-Din, known in the West as Saladin. A skilled general and devout Muslim, Saladin unified Muslim forces across Egypt and Syria. After defeating the Crusaders at the Battle of Hattin, he set his eyes on Jerusalem. What followed was the opposite of 1099. Saladin laid siege, but when the city surrendered, he spared its people. No mass killings, no destruction of churches. Christians were allowed to leave, some even allowed to stay. Saladin's entry into Jerusalem became legendary, not just for its military success, but for its humanity. To this day, it remains a powerful moment of moral contrast in the history of holy war. Despite his victory, Saladin's control didn't end the conflict. More crusades followed, and the city would change hands again in smaller skirmishes. But Saladin's capture of Jerusalem in 1187 reshaped the spiritual and political map of the Middle East, and it restored the city's Islamic identity for generations to come. Ottoman Empire. In 1517, after centuries of shifting control between Crusaders, Ayyubids, and Mamluks, the Ottoman Empire captured Jerusalem. Under the leadership of Sultan Selim I, the city became part of a vast Islamic empire stretching from Eastern Europe to the Arabian Peninsula. For the next 400 years, Jerusalem would remain under Ottoman rule, an era of relative stability, but also of quiet tension. The Ottomans recognized Jerusalem's unique status. Though it was not a political capital, it held immense religious weight. In the mid-1500s, Suleiman the Magnificent undertook major renovations in the city. He restored the city walls, the ones still standing today, rebuilt fountains, roads, and markets, and renewed sacred sites for all three Abrahamic faiths. His rule marked a golden moment of preservation and renewal. Jerusalem under the Ottomans became a multi-faith mosaic. Muslim, Christian, and Jewish communities lived in distinct quarters. The Ottomans maintained tight control, but largely allowed religious life to continue with minimal interference. The status quo, a system freezing the control of holy sites among different denominations, was introduced to prevent sectarian clashes. Ironically, it also cemented religious divisions that remain today. Yet beneath the surface, tensions remained. The city's importance meant it was never forgotten. European Christian powers eyed Jerusalem with renewed interest. Jewish communities abroad dreamed of return, and local Arab Muslims saw the growing outside influence as a threat. As centuries passed, the Ottomans found it harder to manage these layers of faith, nationalism, and foreign pressure. By the 19th century, the empire weakened. Jerusalem, still sacred, still strategic, was no longer a quiet corner of a vast empire. It was now a city watched by the world, waiting once again for its future to change. British rule. By the early 20th century, the Ottoman Empire was collapsing. In 1917, during World War I, British forces led by General Edmund Allenby entered Jerusalem. Unlike past conquerors, Allenby dismounted his horse at the city gate, choosing to walk in, a gesture of respect to its sacred legacy. The British had arrived not as invaders, but as custodians of empire and order. Under the British mandate, Jerusalem was administered with the promise of fairness to all faiths. But promises made in London were hard to keep on the streets of Jerusalem. Britain had committed to supporting a Jewish national home through the Balfour Declaration, while also assuring the Arab population that their rights would be protected. These dual promises set the stage for conflict. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, tensions in Jerusalem escalated. Arab residents feared being displaced by Jewish immigration. Jewish communities, many fleeing European persecution, felt the pressure to defend their place in what they saw as their ancestral homeland. Riots erupted. Blood was shed. And the British, caught in the middle, struggled to maintain control. Meanwhile, the city itself was transforming. Modern roads, schools, and infrastructure were built, but so were fences, checkpoints, and deep mistrust. The city's sacred sites became political flashpoints. The Western Wall, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and Church of the Holy Sepulchre, once symbols of prayer, became symbols of contested identity. By the end of World War II, Britain had lost the will and the ability to govern Jerusalem. The mandate was ending, the UN was stepping in, and the battle for the soul of the city was about to enter a new and dangerous phase, partition of 1948. In 1947, the United Nations proposed a bold solution. Partition Palestine into two states, one Jewish, one Arab, with Jerusalem placed under international control. The plan aimed to calm growing tensions, but instead it lit a fuse. The Jewish leadership accepted the plan, the Arab world rejected it. The streets of Jerusalem braced for war. On May 14, 1948, the State of Israel was declared. Within hours, neighboring Arab nations invaded. Jerusalem became one of the war's most brutal battlegrounds. Jewish neighborhoods in the Old City were bombarded. Arab villages on the outskirts were seized. By the war's end, the city was physically and politically split. West Jerusalem came under Israeli control. It became part of the new state's capital. East Jerusalem, including the Old City and holy sites, fell under Jordanian rule. The ancient heart of Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, the Western Wall, was now off-limits to Jews. For the first time in centuries, the city was divided by war, not religion alone. Barbed wire and snipers lined the dividing border. Residents on both sides lived in fear, separated from neighbors, family, and their own sacred spaces. Churches, mosques, and synagogues stood in silence, their stones heavy with conflict. The world had tried to divide Jerusalem to preserve peace, but instead the partition created a scar across the city, a wound that neither time nor treaties could fully heal. The Six-Day War, 1967. In June 1967, rising tensions across the Middle East erupted into war. Egypt closed the Straits of Tiran. Syria and Jordan mobilized forces. Israel struck first. In just 6 days, it defeated the armies of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, changing the map of the region forever. And at the heart of this war was Jerusalem. On the third day of the conflict, Israeli paratroopers advanced toward East Jerusalem, still under Jordanian control since 1948. Fierce fighting broke out in the old city's surroundings. But then, the impossible happened. Israeli forces broke through the Lion's Gate and entered the Old City for the first time in 19 years. Soldiers wept at the Western Wall, long sealed behind Jordanian lines. For the first time since 1948, the ancient Jewish Quarter and Temple Mount were under Israeli control. The city was declared unified and indivisible, Jerusalem whole again in the eyes of the Israeli state. But for Palestinians, this unification meant something else: occupation. Hundreds of homes were demolished to clear space near the wall. The old city's Arab residents came under military rule. Though access to holy sites was restored for all religions, the political control remained deeply contested. Since 1967, Jerusalem has remained under Israeli sovereignty, but international recognition is divided. To some, the city was restored. To others, it remains under siege. Jerusalem was no longer just a city of faith. It had become the epicenter of a geopolitical struggle with no clear end. Jerusalem had been divided by empire, scarred by war, and reshaped by faith. It had seen the banners of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism rise and fall. It had burned, been rebuilt, and declared whole. But one thing remained unchanged. No one could truly claim it without consequence. Today, the city stands at the heart of the most complex conflict in the modern world. Jews see it as their eternal capital. Palestinians see East Jerusalem as the heart of a future state. The world watches, each wall, each prayer, each protest weighed by history and hope. Peace has been promised, agreements signed, but tension still simmers in alleyways and over rooftops. For every celebration, there is suspicion. For every stone laid, a line is drawn. Because Jerusalem isn't just a city, it is a symbol, a mirror of humanity's longing for truth, identity, and home. Enjoying the journey through history? Make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our community of history enthusiasts. Don't forget to leave a comment below. Tell us what you think, share your favorite historical insights, or suggest a topic you'd love to see us explore. And if you know someone who would love diving into the past, share this video with them. Let's uncover history together.